Selected Poems of Claude McKay. By Claude McKay. Claude McKay, 1889–1948. In Festus Claudius McKay to a Jamaican peasant family, McKay would write poems that inspired not only the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s but also the Black Arts movement of the 1960s. As a young child he went to live with an older brother who was a school teacher. From him, McKay received a background in both classical and British literature and philosophy, and before too long began to write poems in traditional forms. The sonnet tradition he imitated as a child he would dramatically transform in his 20s. McKay would take the romance and the consolations of the historical sonnet and replace them with a hand grenade of protest. Compressed and rhetorically proficient anger would now be among the sonnet's resources and its cultural aims. The form would never be quite the same again. Together with Millais, whose anti-romantic sonnets turned the form about face, McKay reconceived the meaning of a centuries-long tradition. But his first poems were actually rather different. A white British expatriate in Jamaica, Walter Jekyll, encouraged him to write dialect poems embodying Jamaican folklore. That he did in Songs of Jamaica, 1912, and Constab Ballads, 1912, drew on his brief stint as a policeman. That same year he emigrated to the United States to study farming but soon abandoned it for New York City. While working as a railroad dining car waiter, he began to write radical poetry. If We Must Die appeared in the July 1919 issue of the left-wing magazine Liberator. McKay had been drawn to the radical union, the WW, to several socialist groups, and to the new masses radicals who were now issuing Liberator. For a time, he was an active member of the New York left, even making a successful trip to the Soviet Union from 1922 to 1923. His most influential book of poems, Harlem Shadows, 1922, was a founding text of the Harlem Renaissance. Many of its poems had inspired African American writers when they appeared in journals earlier. Even this small selection gives us a rich and multifaceted portrait of race in America, but the poems demand careful reading. If We Must Die should be read in the context of the race riots and the anti-communist Red Scare of 1919. The White Cities is not an attack on white people but rather a critique of race-based economic and political power. The next decade of McKay's life was spent mostly in France, where he wrote two novels, Home to Harlem, 1928, and Banjo, 1929, struggled with illness, and finally returned to the United States in 1934. He would later write two autobiographical volumes and a non-fiction study, Harlem, Negro Metropolis, 1940. For years later he converted to Catholicism, associating himself with the progressive wing of Catholic activism. Although he became disenchanted with Soviet communism, he remained committed to international socialism. His final poems still carry the force of the work he had done decades earlier. The importance of his complete poems, 2004, cannot be overstated. It includes 100 previously unpublished poems. Claude McKay. The Harlem Dancer. Applauding youths laughed with young prostitutes and watched her perfect, half-clothed body sway. Her voice was like the sound of blended flutes blown by black players upon a picnic day. She sang and danced on gracefully and calm, the light gauze hanging loose about her form. To me she seemed a proudly swaying palm, grown lovelier for passing through a storm. Upon her swarthy neck black shiny curls luxuriant fell, and tossing coins in praise. The wine-flushed, bold-eyed boys, and even the girls, devoured her shape with eager, passionate gaze. But looking at her falsely smiling face, I knew herself was not in that strange place. To the white fiends, think you I'm not fiend and savage too? Think you I could not arm me with a gun, and shoot down 10 of you for every one of my black brothers murdered, burnt by you? Be not deceived, for every deed you do, I could match, outmatch, am I not Afric's son? Black of that black land where black deeds are done. But the Almighty from the darkness drew my soul and said, even thou shalt be a light, a while to burn on the benighted earth. Thy dusky face I set among the white, for thee to prove thyself of higher worth, before the world is swallowed up in night. To show thy little lamp, go forth, go forth. If we must die degree, if we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in an inglorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs. Poem title, written in response to race riots against black Americans that took place in Chicago and other cities in the summer of 1919, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain, then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us though dead. O kinsman, we must meet the common foe. Though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men we'll face the murderous, cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying, but fighting back. The lynching? His spirit in smoke ascended to high heaven. His father, by the cruelest way of pain, had bidden him to his bosom once again. The awful sin remained still unforgiven. All night a bright and solitary star, perchance the one that ever guided him, yet gave him up at last to fate's wild whim, hung pitifully o'er the swinging char. Day dawned, and soon the mixed crowds came to view, the ghastly body swaying in the sun. The women thronged to look, but never a one showed sorrow in her eyes of steely blue. And little lads, lynchers that were to be, danced round the dreadful thing in fiendish glee. The tropics in New York, bananas ripe and green, and ginger root, cocoa in pods and alligator pears. Poem title, as an event when a mob murders someone accused of a crime, lynching has a long history in America. But only black men as a group have had to live under its shadow, to live in fear of being taken from their homes without reason and be beaten, dismembered, set afire, and hung. Far from treating it as a secret crime, lynching advocates defended the practice in print. In the period between the end of Reconstruction in the American South, 1877, and the time McKay wrote his poem, thousands of African American men and women had been lynched. White families brought children to watch these sadistic rituals, newspapers sometimes announced the sight in advance, and railroad companies made a profit selling excursion tickets. In 1915, the Ku Klux Klan, a racist organization that practiced lynching, was revived. It grew to several million members by the early 1920s. 391. Claude McKay. And tangerines and mangoes and grapefruit, fit for the highest prize at parish fairs, set in the window, bringing memories of fruit trees laden by low-singing rills, and dewy dawns, and mystical blue skies, in benediction over nun-like hills. My eyes grew dim, and I could no more gaze. A wave of longing through my body swept, and, hungry for the old, familiar ways, I turned aside and bowed my head and wept. The White City. I will not toy with it nor bend an inch. Degree. Deep in the secret chambers of my heart, I muse my lifelong hate, and without flinch, I bear it nobly as I live my part. My being would be a skeleton, a shell, if this dark passion that fills my every mood, and makes my heaven in the white world's hell degree, did not forever feed me vital blood. Ice the mighty city through a mist, the strident trains that speed the goaded mass, the poles and spires and towers, vapor-kissed, the fortressed port through which the great ships pass, the tides, the wharves, the dens I contemplate, are sweet like wanton loves because hate. America, although she feeds me bread of bitterness, and sinks into my throat her tiger's tooth, 1920. 1 inch, compare to a VL not budge an inch, in William Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. 7. Hell, McKay is alluding to lines 254 to 255 in Book I of John Milton's Paradise Lost. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heathen of hell, a hell of heathen. Milton's narrator is commenting on Satan. Illinois Towers, McKay is alluding to, and reversing, the tone of William Wordsworth's composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3, 1802 inch, this city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Stealing my breath of life, one will confess, ill of this cultured hell that tests my youth. Her vigor flows like tides into my blood, giving me strength erect against her hate. Her bigness sweeps my being like a flood. Yet as a rebel fronts a king in state, I stand within her walls with not a shred of terror, malice, not a word of jeer. Darkly I gaze into the days ahead, and see her might and granite wonders there, beneath the touch of time's unerring hand, like priceless treasures sinking in the sand. Outcast, for the dim regions whence my fathers came, my spirit, bondage by the body, longs. Words felt, but never heard, my lips would frame. My soul would sing forgotten jungle songs. I would go back to darkness and to peace. But the great Western world holds me in fee, and I may never hope for full release. While to its alien gods I bend my knee, something in me is lost, forever lost. Some vital thing has gone out of my heart, and I must walk the way of life a ghost, among the sons of earth, a thing apart. For I was born, far from my native clime, under the white man's menace, out of time. Mulatto, because I am the white man's son, his own, bearing his bastard birthmark on my face. I will dispute his title to his throne, forever fight him for my rightful place. There is a searing hate within my soul, a hate that only kin can feel for kin, a hate that makes me vigorous and whole, and spurs me on increasingly to win, because I am my cruel father's child. 395. Claude McKay. My love of justice stirs me up to hate, a warring Ishmaelite, unreconciled. When falls the hour I shall not hesitate, into my father's heart to plunge the knife, to gain the utmost freedom that is life. The Negro's tragedy. It is the Negro's tragedy I feel, which binds me like a heavy iron chain. It is the Negro's wounds I want to heal, because I know the keenness of his pain. Only a thorn-crowned Negro and no white can penetrate into the Negro's ken, or feel the thickness of the shroud of night. which hides and buries him from other men. So what I write is urged out of my blood. There is no white man who could write my book, though many think their story should be told, of what the Negro people ought to brook. Our statesmen roam the world to set things right. This Negro laughs and prays to God for light. Look within. Lord, let me not be silent while we fight. In Europe Germans, Asia Japanese, for setting up a fascist way of might, while 15 million Negroes on their knees pray for salvation from the fascist yoke of these United States. Remove the beam. Nearly 2,000 years since Jesus spoke. From your own eyes before the mote you deem it proper from your neighbors to extract. We bathe our lies in vapors of sweet myrrh, and close our eyes not to perceive the fact. But Jesus said, you whited sepulchre, pretending to be uncorrupt of sin, while worm-infested, rotten through within. Tiger. The white man is a tiger at my throat, drinking my blood as my life ebbs away, and muttering that his terrible striped coat is freedom's and portends the light of day. O white man, you may suck up all my blood, and throw my carcass into potter's field, but never will I say with you that mud is bread for Negroes. Never will I yield. Europe and Africa and Asia wait the touted New Deal of the New World's hand. New systems will be built on race and hate. The eagle and the dollar will command. O Lord, my body, and my heart too, break. The tiger in his strength his thirst must slake. 1946 699. Edna St. Vincent Millay, 1892–1950. Born in Rockville, Maine, Millay was educated at Vassar. In 1917, she moved to New to Greenwich Village and joined the revolutionary mix of politics, modernism, and sexual experimentation that typified the community. Her poem First Fig is usually taken as the signature poem of an ecstatically romantic mode of writing. Here, it suggests the more risky mix of commitments that shaped her life. She was in fact consistently involved in political causes through World War II and regularly wrote poems about them, as A Justice Denied in Massachusetts, Say That We Saw Spain Die, and I Forgot for a Moment will demonstrate. But her most important legacy is no doubt the witty, anti-romantic sonnets she wrote in significant number. Their rhetorical dexterity and confidence reflect an adaptation of Elizabethan sonnet style, while the gender instability and reversal of conventional gendered roles embody both her feminism and the rethinking of sexual identity that preoccupied modernist writers and the general public. These poems merit a major place in the history of the modern sonnet. First Fig. My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But my foes, and my friends, it gives a lovely light. Second Fig. Safe upon the solid rock the ugly houses stand. Come and see my sinning palace built upon the sand. Recudo. We were very tired, we were very merry. We had gone back and forth all night on the ferry. It was bare and bright, and smelled like a stable. But we looked into a fire, we leaned across a table. We lay on the hilltop underneath the moon. And the whistles kept blowing, and the dawn came soon.